Los Zetas, the most brutal cartel. Beginning as a group of deserters from an elite unit of the armed forces at the service of the Gulf Cartel, the Zetas would go on to become one of the most powerful and feared cartels in Mexico before infighting and the loss of leaders started the organization's decline. The Zetas started out as an enforcer gang for the Gulf Cartel, predominantly made up of former soldiers with specialized training. Their military background and unbridled ferocity proved an underworld game-changer, with the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, describing them as perhaps the most technologically advanced, sophisticated and violent of these paramilitary enforcement groups. The Zetas broke away from the Gulf Cartel in the mid-2000s to become its own group, and launched an offensive that would see them expand throughout Mexico and Guatemala. The group employed a new model of organized crime, based on violently seizing and holding territory, using fear rather than corruption as a first resort. However, after rising to the point where they could compete with the mighty Sinaloa cartel, the Zetas are now a fragmented force, held together by little more than a name and increasingly dependent on local criminal revenues rather than the transnational flow of drugs for their income. History. In 1997, 31 members of the Mexican Army's elite airborne special forces group, Grupo Aeromóvil de Fuerzas Especiales, GAFES, defected and began working as hired assassins, bodyguards and drug runners for the Gulf Cartel and its leader Ociel Cardenas Guillén. The original leader of the armed group, Lieutenant Arturo Guzmán de Cinas, alias Z1, was killed in 2002. After the arrest and extradition of Cardenas, the Zetas seized the opportunity to strike out on their own. Under the leadership of Heriberto Lazcano, alias El Lazca or Z3, the Zetas, numbering approximately 300, set up their own independent drug, arms and human trafficking networks. The Zetas' logistical sophistication and military training helped catapult the group to power. They became known for their use of state-of-the-art weapons and communications technology, and for employing military-like discipline in planning operations and gathering intelligence. Unlike other cartels, the Zetas did not buy alliances so much as terrorize their enemies. They tortured victims, strung up bodies, and slaughtered indiscriminately, as was brutally illustrated in August 2010, when the Zetas killed 72 migrants and dumped their bodies in a hole in Tamaulipas. The Zetas preferred to take military-style control of territory, holding it through sheer force and exploiting its criminal opportunities. Although their military training was diluted over time, their brutality was not. Rival cartels struggling against the Zetas began to adopt some of their tactics, further ramping up violence in the country. By 2010, the Zetas had established a presence in 405 Mexican municipalities, over twice as many as their nearest rivals. They had also moved into Guatemala, seizing strategic drug trafficking territories with their trademark violence. However, they were in nearly constant war with the Gulf Cartel over control of the key border state of Tamaulipas, especially the cities of Matamoros, Reynosa, and Nuevo Laredo, as well as the key economic hub of Monterrey. The Zetas also became embroiled in numerous other cartel wars across the country, including taking on the might of the Sinaloa cartel. During this time, the Zetas built up a network of international drug trafficking contacts, stretching through Central America to Colombia, and with reported connections in Venezuela, Europe, the United States and West Africa. However, the territorial control of each local faction also allowed them to take their share from any other criminal activity taking place in their plaza, and the Zetas also began to profit from everything from kidnapping migrants to pirating DVDs. The group also began looking for political protection, and would go on to infiltrate state governments in states like Tamaulipas and Veracruz. Despite their rapid ascent, by 2012, the Zetas were beginning to crack, sparking a process of fragmentation and atomization that continues today. It was becoming increasingly difficult to coordinate all of the local factions centrally, but the fault line that would ultimately cause a split was the deteriorating relationship between the Trevino brothers, Miguel, alias Z40, and Alejandro, alias Omar or Z42, who divided into rival factions, the Northeast Cartel, Cartel del Noreste, and the Zetas Old School, Los Zetas Vieja Escuela. The Zetas were further undermined by a steady series of high-profile blows to the leadership, the most serious of which was the loss of Lazcano, who was killed in October 2012. Although the mysterious disappearance of his body shortly after sparked conspiracy theories, he remains alive today. The Zetas also lost Miguel Trevino, who was arrested in July 2013, and his brother Alejandro, who was arrested in March 2015. With no clear national, centralized leadership, the Zetas have broken into splinter groups and largely independent local factions, each with their own operations, priorities and alliances. The breakup of the organization's national cohesion, in addition to a huge loss of influence in Central America, has made transnational drug trafficking increasingly difficult, and local factions now often rely more on profiting from crime in territories they hold than from international drug trafficking. Still, smaller, more localized cells that once assumed the Zetas brand continue to operate throughout much of the Zetas' former territory. In February 2018, Mexican Marines captured Zetas capo José María Guizar Valencia, alias Z43. Valencia allegedly operated in the states of Veracruz, Tabasco, and Chiapas, along with overseeing drug shipments through Central America. The capture of Valencia is likely to cause further atomization within an already fractured and weakened organization. Leadership. The Zetas as an unified criminal organization no longer exists. The group's fragmentation into several smaller splinter cells has made it increasingly difficult to identify those in leadership positions. Z40 was one of the first to join the Gulf Cartel's security arm, the Zetas. When Zetas commander Arturo Guzman de Sena was killed in 2002, he rose through the ranks. In July 2012, the Zetas reportedly split into two factions, one side headed by Z40, the other by Heriberto Lazcano, alias C3. The rival capos each accused the other of betrayal and became embroiled in a bitter and violent power struggle. In October 2012, Mexican security forces reported shooting and killing Z3, leaving Trevino as the most senior Zetas commander. In October 2012, a Zetas splinter group comprised of opponents of Z40 announced they had formed a new group, Los Legionarios, with the express purpose of waging war against Z40 and his organization. Trevino worked to consolidate his hold over his Zetas. However, he was captured in July 2013 in Anahuac, a town southwest of Nuevo Laredo. A 2017 DEA report indicates that Z40's cousin Juan Gerardo Trevino Chavez, alias El Huevo, is the most powerful leader of the highly fragmented Zetas. Other sources have been more specific, stating that El Huevo currently serves as leader of the Northeast Cartel faction. Geography. The Zetas criminal empire once had a presence that stretched across Mexico, with their stronghold stretching from Nuevo Laredo to Monterrey. Their reach also expanded into Central America, especially Guatemala. However, now the group is limited to Mexico and occupies a patchwork of territory across the country. The Zetas' most critical areas remain Tamaulipas and the Gulf Coast. The Los Zetas is organized in a hierarchical structure with certain groups or cells operating in tiers of command. Its members purchase bulk quantities of narcotics and sell them abroad as well as to other non-Los Zetas drug traffickers operating in Mexico. In addition to those considered actual members of the Los Zetas, any large-scale narcotics trafficker operating in a region controlled by the Los Zetas must support and associate with the Los Zetas or risk execution. The Los Zetas not only supplies to the traffickers, they charge the traffickers for the privilege of operating in Los Zetas territory. That fee includes cash payments as well as firearms and other. In addition to allowing these traffickers to operate in their territory, the Los Zetas had control of law enforcement entities and political subdivisions within the state of Coahuila, which allowed them to operate with impunity and to obtain real-time intelligence about the movement and location of the Mexican military and law enforcement within the state. Allies and enemies. The Zetas have made numerous temporary alliances with groups such as the Familia Michoacana and the Beltran Leyva organization, as well as waging war against any number of rivals. However, two things generally remain the same: their rivalry with their former parent organization the Gulf Cartel, and their rivalry with the Sinaloa Cartel. Nevertheless, even this may be changing in the Zetas' current fragmented state where alliances and disputes are more localized. Internationally, the Zetas reportedly built alliances with criminal organizations in Colombia, Central America, in particular Guatemala, Venezuela, West Africa, Europe and the United States. It is unclear how much of this network now remains. Prospects. The Zetas' days as Mexico's most feared cartel and a drug trafficking organization with a vast transnational reach are now over. However, this does not mean the name will fade anytime soon. Instead, they are likely to continue the process of fragmentation, and splinter cells like the Northeast Cartel will continue to operate with an increasingly local focus on their criminal activities. Los Zetas epitomizes a next-generation, hyper-violent cartel. Its organizational structure, criminal activities, and codes of conduct are unlike any other drug trafficking organization. What began as a protection force for the leader of the Gulf Cartel broke off to become a terrifying cartel in its own right. The Gulf Cartel now participates in an anti-Zeta alliance. Skilled in extortion and aimed at expanding territory, Los Zetas uses militaristic violence to exert control. The support of law enforcement has been crucial to their dominance. Police aid their criminal activities, join their ranks, or cave to their plata o plomo, silver or lead, approach. With the choice between taking a bribe or a bullet, submission is the logical choice. This case outlines the history, hierarchy, recruitment, accounting structure, weaponry, and revenue streams of Los Zetas. The end of the case explains the threats to the cartel and a vacuum of leadership. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe for more.